The story kicks off in the Nile Valley, way back in 3600 BC. The people of Egypt are chanting, their voices echoing as they worship a powerful figure. He's being carried to his pyramid by his 4 loyal horsemen: pestilence, famine, death, and war. Everything is in place for a ritual that will transfer his consciousness into a new host, a mutant with incredible regenerative abilities, essentially making him immortal. But outside, betrayal is brewing. A group of rebels turns against him, triggering massive stone pillars to crash down inside the pyramid. Chaos erupts. The horsemen fight to protect their master, but as the structure collapses, everyone inside is crushed. In her final moments, Death manages to shield his body, ensuring his survival. The transfer is successful, but he remains buried beneath the rubble. Fast forward to 1983, Ohio. A high school class is discussing recent mutant events, specifically how Erik, better known as Magneto, attacked a peace summit but was stopped by the shape-shifting Raven Darkholme, alias Mystique. Meanwhile, a student named Scott Summers is struggling with his vision, accidentally giving off the wrong impression to a classmate's girlfriend. The jealous boyfriend follows him to the bathroom, ready for a fight. But before things escalate, Scott's uncontrollable powers kick in. His eyes unleash a powerful beam, sending the bully flying and causing serious damage to the school. Meanwhile, in West Berlin, a crowd gathers for an underground mutant fight club. A mutant with large wings, known as Angel, dominates his opponent. But the next challenger is someone special, Nightcrawler, a teleporter who can vanish and reappear in an instant. At first, Nightcrawler tries to avoid fighting, but Angel warns him that refusing isn't an option. The match turns brutal. Nightcrawler eventually gets the upper hand, throwing Angel into the electrified cage that surrounds them. Just as things are about to take a deadly turn, Mystique arrives and cuts the power, allowing them to escape. Angel takes off, while Mystique rescues Nightcrawler and smuggles him to safety. Meanwhile, Magneto, now living under the alias Henryk Gorski, has built a quiet life in Poland with his wife, Magda, and their daughter, Nina. He works at a metal foundry, blending in with ordinary people. One night, he sings Nina a lullaby, passing down a piece of his past. He promises her that she'll never have to endure what he did, losing his family to violence. Back in the US, Scott's older brother, Alex Summers, takes him to a special place, Xavier's School for Gifted Youngsters. To prevent another accident, Scott wears a blindfold. Upon arrival, he literally bumps into Jean Grey, a telepathic mutant. They exchange a few words before Alex introduces Scott to Hank McCoy, also known as Beast. Together, they meet Professor Charles Xavier. To test Scott's abilities, Xavier instructs him to remove the blindfold and aim at a target. Scott hesitates, but finally lets loose a powerful optic blast, splitting a tree in half. Though he fears expulsion, Xavier is impressed and welcomes him into the school. Meanwhile, in Cairo, CIA agent Moira McTaggart is trailing a mysterious group marked with strange symbols. She follows them underground and discovers them performing an ancient ritual, one that awakens the long-buried entity. She barely escapes before the chamber erupts in an explosion, sending shockwaves across the world. The tremors are felt even in Poland, where Erik is working. A molten metal container nearly falls on a co-worker, but Erik instinctively uses his powers to save him, exposing himself in the process. At Xavier's school, Jean Grey has a terrifying vision of global destruction. She confides in Charles, who reassures her. With Hank's help, Charles uses Cerebro to track the origin of the earthquake. What he finds is unexpected. Moira McTaggart, someone from his past. Meanwhile, Erik and Magda prepare to flee Poland, fearing that Erik's secret is out. But before they can leave, they realize Nina is missing. Searching the woods, they find her surrounded by officers. The police demand the truth, who he really is. To protect his family, Erik surrenders, admitting that he is Magneto. But things take a tragic turn. In a panic, Nina screams, unleashing her mutant ability to control animals. Crows swarm the officers. One of them, startled, accidentally lets an arrow fly. It strikes Nina and Magda, killing them instantly. Devastated, Erik cradles their bodies, grief turning into rage. With his daughter's necklace in hand, he uses his powers to slaughter every officer present. Back in Egypt, the ancient being is now fully awake, roaming the city and taking in the modern world. He watches as a young mutant, Aurora Monroe, later known as Storm, steals from market vendors. When she's caught, Apocalypse steps in and takes out 3 people instantly, cutting their heads while trapping another inside the walls. Meanwhile, Alex and Charles visit Moira McTaggart, hoping to get some answers about what happened in Egypt. But Moira is hesitant. It's classified information. When she questions how they even got inside, Charles smoothly lies, claiming he has 5-level clearance and access to everything they need. Elsewhere, Aurora brings Apocalypse to her hideout and offers him food. As he sits there, he uses the television to absorb human languages and quickly learns everything about the modern world. Watching history unfold before him, he declares that humanity has become weak, filled with false gods, and that the world needs to be purified. Aurora tells him that people live under strict laws, but Apocalypse easily manipulates her into following him, massively boosting her mutant powers in the process. Meanwhile, Raven takes Nightcrawler to meet a mutant named Caliban, who specializes in helping mutants forge new identities with fake IDs and passports. During their conversation, Caliban tells Raven about what happened to Erik Lensher, and upon hearing the news, she wastes no time. She and Nightcrawler immediately take off to find him. Back at the school, Hank builds special glasses for Scott to control his powers, finally allowing him to see without destroying everything in sight. As he adjusts to his new life, he crosses paths with Jean once more. Feeling like an outsider, Scott doubts himself, but Jean assures him he's not alone. Everyone at the school is dealing with their own struggles. Meanwhile, Apocalypse, the ancient mutant, is gathering his own team. With Storm now under his wing, he seeks out more recruits. He arrives at Caliban's hideout, demanding information. Caliban refuses, but his enforcer, Psylocke, steps in. Impressed by her strength, Apocalypse unlocks her full potential, and she pledges allegiance to him. They then find Angel, whose wings were damaged in battle. Rather than leave him behind, Apocalypse transforms him into something new, giving him deadly metal wings and a new purpose. Back at the mansion, Mystique and Nightcrawler arrive at Xavier's school. Hank is stunned to see her, but welcomes them in. Nightcrawler is introduced to Scott and a few other students, and they decide to take him on his first trip to the mall. Meanwhile, Hank urges Mystique to convince Charles to form a new team. The world needs the X-Men, but Mystique insists she's only there for Erik. Erik, now consumed by vengeance, returns to his old workplace. Locking the doors behind him, he confronts his co-workers, asking them if they've ever lost someone they love. Before they can answer, he prepares to unleash his wrath. But before he can strike, Apocalypse and his newly assembled team teleport in. Erik warns them not to interfere, but Apocalypse has no intention of saving anyone. In an instant, he buries the entire factory in rubble, killing everyone inside. Apocalypse then takes Erik to Auschwitz, the place where Erik first discovered his powers and where he lost his family. He urges Erik to tap into his pain, to use it as fuel. Enraged, Erik unleashes his abilities, tearing apart the buildings around him. Apocalypse watches in satisfaction, declaring that they will build a new world together. News of Erik's destruction spreads. Meanwhile, Peter Maximoff, also known as Quicksilver, watches from home. His mother catches him staring at the screen, knowing exactly what's on his mind. She warns him not to get involved, but Peter isn't one to sit on the sidelines. Back at the mansion, Charles, Alex, and Moira return. Charles is shocked to see Mystique, but before they can discuss, she greets Moira, who doesn't recognize her. Charles admits he erased Moira's memories long ago, but they have bigger problems. With Erik now in Apocalypse's grasp, Charles uses Cerebro to reach him. He pleads with Erik to come back, but Erik has given up hope. He tried to live a peaceful life, but the world wouldn't let him, and now he's lost everything. Then, Apocalypse senses Charles. He hijacks Cerebro, taking control over Charles' mind. With the help of that, he control all over Nuke Officer Mind and launch. As nuclear weapons around the world begin launching, Charles desperately orders Alex to destroy Cerebro. As they try to flee, Apocalypse arrives, taking Charles with him. In a desperate move, Alex tries to save his friend, makes a bold move, but in the process, he unintentionally sets off a massive explosion, destroying Hank's machines. Just when all hope seems lost, Quicksilver bursts onto the scene in a blur of motion, rescuing everyone before the flames can touch them. Meanwhile, Scott, Jean, Nightcrawler, and another student return to the school, only to be met with a heartbreaking sight. It's completely destroyed. Scott frantically searches for his brother, but Hank delivers the devastating truth. Alex was closest to the blast, and he didn't make it. Suddenly, a helicopter descends onto the school grounds. The crew claims they're there to provide medical assistance, and Moira, assuming they're part of an official agency, approaches without suspicion. But then, the truth is revealed. Their leader steps out. It's William Stryker. Before anyone can react, his men unleash a powerful sonic blast that knocks out nearly everyone except for Scott, Jean, and Nightcrawler. Thinking fast, Jean manipulates the mind of one of Stryker's soldiers, keeping herself and the others hidden as Stryker and his team capture Raven, Hank, Peter and Moira, taking them away. Determined to save them, Scott comes up with a plan. He asks Nightcrawler to teleport them inside the chopper while Jean uses her abilities to keep them undetected. But as soon as they make it inside, an energy field activates, completely nullifying their powers. Trapped, they have no choice but to watch as Stryker flies them to his facility. Once there, he locks Raven, Hank, Moira, and Peter in a cell. The group tries to reason with him, warning about the looming threat of Apocalypse. But Stryker isn't interested. He ignores their pleas and walks away. Meanwhile, Apocalypse brings his newly assembled followers, along with Charles, to the ruins of his ancient home. He orders Charles to broadcast a message to the entire world. Charles refuses, insisting he can't do it without Cerebro. But Apocalypse has other plans. He smirks and tells him he doesn't need any machines when he has him. Back at the facility, Peter has a quiet conversation with Raven, questioning whether Erik is truly a villain. Then, in a moment of vulnerability, he confesses the truth. Erik is his father. Before Raven can fully respond, something extraordinary happens. Across the globe, Charles's voice suddenly echoes in everyone's minds. Apocalypse is using him to send a worldwide message. But hidden within, Charles sends a private message to Jean, one only she can hear. Following the telepathic signal, Scott, Jean, and Nightcrawler sneak into the generator room. But before they can figure out their next move, they hear something growling from inside a locked chamber. Scott assumes it's some kind of animal. Jean disagrees. "It's a man," she whispers. As the guards start closing in, Jean makes a quick decision. She unlocks the chamber. The doors burst open, revealing him, Wolverine. Unleashed and filled with rage, he tears through the facility, eliminating every soldier in sight. Scott, Jean, and Nightcrawler follow his path of destruction, watching in shock. But before Wolverine can leave, Jean stops him. She gently places a hand on his head and taps into his mind, unlocking fragments of his memories. Silently, he processes what he sees. Then, without a word, he vanishes into the wilderness. Regaining their focus, the trio rushes toward the cells. Scott charges up and blasts the door open, freeing Moira and the others. Together, they escape and set their sights on their next target, Apocalypse. Meanwhile, Apocalypse reshapes his ancient pyramid, destroying everything in its path. He turns to Magneto and orders him to bring destruction on a global scale. Charles, watching in horror, asks what his own role in all of this is. Apocalypse smirks. The most important one. Erik harnesses the Earth's magnetic field to reduce entire human civilizations to dust, wiping out cities and structures with unstoppable force. At that moment, Raven and the others arrive at the scene. They quickly form a plan. Raven and Peter will try to reach Erik, while the rest of the team focuses on stopping Apocalypse and rescuing Charles. Inside the pyramid, Apocalypse prepares his horsemen for battle, ordering them to keep intruders out until the transference is complete. Hank and the newer recruits take Angel by surprise, allowing Nightcrawler to sneak inside. But just as he gains access, Angel turns, ready to strike. Outside, the rest of the team faces an intense battle against Storm and Psylocke, struggling to hold their ground. Meanwhile, Raven finds Erik and tells him he still has a family, that he's not alone. Peter, realizing the moment he's been dreading has come, tries to confess the truth, that Erik is his father. But the words never come out. Inside the pyramid, Nightcrawler locates Charles just in time, right before the transference process is completed. He grabs him and teleports them both to safety. But the escape is far from over. As the team makes a run for it, Angel and Psylocke destroy their aircraft, forcing Nightcrawler to teleport everyone to a safe location. Apocalypse, now enraged, recovers quickly and calls for Charles. Meanwhile, Quicksilver uses his super speed to land multiple punches on Apocalypse, but Apocalypse eventually catches him and shatters his leg. At that moment, Psylocke arrives with her sword, pretending to strike, but she attacks Apocalypse's neck. However, he quickly heals, revealing that she was merely a distraction. She is actually Mystique in disguise, but Apocalypse sees through the deception and attacks her. Erik watches the entire scene unfold, torn by what he sees. Seeing no other option, Charles realizes he shares a psychic connection with Apocalypse. He decides to fight him from within his mind, but the plan backfires. Apocalypse is too powerful and exploits their link to pinpoint Charles's exact location. As Apocalypse advances, Magneto makes a fateful choice. He turns against him, using his powers to hold him back. But even with all his strength, it's not enough. Everyone tries their best to stop Apocalypse, but he keeps fighting, overpowering them at every turn. Seizing the moment, Professor X reaches out Jean, urging her to let go and embrace her true power. Jean steps forward, unleashing the full force of the Phoenix. Her overwhelming energy combines with the efforts of the entire team, finally weakening Apocalypse. Desperate, he tries to escape, but before he can, Storm betrays him, delivering the final blow. As he disintegrates, his last words echo in the air. Everything is revealed. With Apocalypse defeated, Jean helps Charles regain consciousness. Charles, in turn, restores Moira's lost memories, bringing back their shared past. Back at the mansion, life begins to rebuild. Erik and Jean work together to restore the school, while Monroe asks Peter if he ever plans to tell Erik the truth. Peter sighs and smiles. As Charles and Erik share a final conversation, Charles tries to convince him to stay, but Erik, always walking his own path, simply smiles and says goodbye. And that's the full breakdown of this movie from Movie Decode. Hope you guys enjoyed this recap. Let me know your favorite moment in the comments, and don't forget to like, subscribe.